Hello and welcome everybody to our executive leadership training today. My name is Corey Beagley. I'm going to be your host tonight, and I am super excited to be sharing this evening with you guys. I very, very much appreciate your time being here. For those of you that do not know me, again, my name is Corey Beagley. I'm one of the newer members here at the corporate side of ASEA. I've been here for about 2 months now. I am officially the sales manager of US and Canada. I work directly under Karen, and I cannot tell you how excited and blessed I am to be here. ASEA is so amazing, amazing products, amazing leadership, and amazing associates. I've had the awesome opportunity to meet a good handful of you, and I just can't thank you enough for your hard work and all that you've taught me so far. Well, everyone, we have a wonderful meeting prepared tonight with the wonderful Chuck Funky. Chuck is our CEO here at ASEA, and he's prepared a really, really cool message for tonight. Before we get into our message with Chuck, I do have just a couple announcements. The first one is, as many of you know, our convention is coming up soon in September, the 12th through 14th in Las Vegas. And we have an amazing promotion and an opportunity. We have seen amazing data to prove that our associates who attend convention are 300% more likely to rank advance, and then versus those that do not attend convention. But we also get that it can be a little bit challenging to make it to convention. So we have this amazing promotion where you guys can actually earn 2 tickets to convention and up to $750 in travel reimbursement. So we have about a month left of that. I highly, highly recommend to get with some of your team members to work together, hold each other accountable. The best way to achieve our goals is to find accountability partners with similar goals and motives. And again, one last announcement here is our corporate office will be closed on July 18th. That's this Thursday morning. That's 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. just Mountain Time. So our associate support will be opening back up just after 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And then finally, I do want to introduce our wonderful Chuck Funky with our mission. And the reason I wanted to utilize this is not only an amazing reminder about our mission to better people's lives and to be a force for good in the world, but there's no one better than Mr. Chuck Funky that has this motive and mission in mind and cares more about our mission and our vision here at ASEA than Chuck. Again, I've only been here for 2 months, but I can't tell you how honored I am to work with Chuck and some of our other executives. Chuck just has an amazing heart. I've learned so much from him already, and there couldn't be a better guy, a smarter guy to lead us than the wonderful Chuck. And so Chuck tonight has prepared a message for us, and it's funny, a study came out a couple years ago that actually proved that the human attention span is ever decreasing. It used to be 12 seconds a few years ago, and now it's all the way down to 8 seconds. And if you can believe it or not, a goldfish's attention span is 9 seconds. So the average human being has a shorter attention span than a goldfish. And it's incredible. It's the technology, it's the way our culture and lives are going. And that can be a problem, especially when it comes to building a business and trying to be effective and use our time wisely. So without any other delay or further ado, I want to turn the time over to Chuck Funky, who is going to go into how we can better utilize our time and attention. So I will transfer the screen here over to the wonderful Chuck. Just one moment, please. Alrighty, Chuck.
Hey, Corey, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you great.
Hey, well, great. Thank you so much for that very warm introduction, and thank you for having joined the ASEA team. If you have not had the opportunity to meet Corey or to visit with him, we would strongly encourage you to do so. He's a tremendous resource for those of you here in North America, and just a wonderful resource. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and just share some thoughts with you tonight. This is there's a bit of randomness to what I'm going to share with you. I'll try to tie it all together at the very end. But the title that was published, and they asked me several days ago, what would you like to title your presentation as? And I thought about it. I said, well, why don't we just call it The Power of Paying Attention? And that might not necessarily mean what you think it means, but we're going to talk about a couple of different things before we actually get to the main point of what I'd like to visit with you about. So I'd like to share something with you that's not really based on any particular science. I haven't commissioned or read studies that will prove out what I'm going to show you on this next slide right here. It's just really something that I've experienced in probably close to 25 years of working with sales-driven organizations, organizations that really rely on the recruitment of new people into the business in order to continue to grow and to thrive. And something that I've experienced over the years is that not everybody that we enroll into ASEA is going to be successful. And by what I'm sharing with you right now, I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone, because we, as you know, one of our core values is humanity. We don't ascribe value to people based on their rank, or based on the amount of money they have, or based on the amount of education they may possess. We value people inherently as people. So don't let what I'm going to tell you right now or share with you as purely observational on my part in any way taint that, because I'm not talking about this 120% in a negative light. I'm just talking about it from a reality, from a business standpoint, and how you spend your time. And what I've coined this as is the 20-60-20 principle. And to break it down for you, what I simply mean by that is that if you look at a block of people, and in your case as leaders at ASEA, you wouldn't be on this call if you weren't in a leadership circle. But if you look at your entire organization, or really any cross-section of a sales organization, there's about 20% of the people that are going to succeed no matter what you or I or anybody else does. It's inherent in their nature. And despite any number of shortcomings that the company may have, shortcomings that their leader may have, or any number of things, there's about 20% of the people that will just simply figure it out. They'll figure it out. They will be able to push through the obstacles that are in their way, and they'll go on and they will be successful. It's not a large percentage of people, but there's just a certain amount of people that are actually going to do that. They don't need a lot of hand holding. They don't need a lot of support. They don't need a lot of tools. They're just going to figure it out. There's about 60% of the people who we can actually influence. That based on how the company delivers tools, technology, marketing materials, how involved their upline leader is, how much of an interest others take in them, how well we do things as a company, how well we do things as individuals towards them, that will actually make a difference in their success or failure in the business. And that's the folks that we should be focusing on, are the ones that we can actually make an influence on, meaning that without a positive influence from us, they may not actually make it. With a proper amount of influence and paying the proper amount of attention to them, they can actually flourish and succeed, but they can't inherently do it by themselves or on their own. They need help. And there's about 20% of the people, and this is where I don't want to offend anybody, but there's about 20% of the people who are going to not make it, or who are going to fail in the business no matter what we do. We could have our ambassador diamonds show up at their house every morning, get them out of bed, take them along, observe their process, give them feedback, and they just simply would not still be able to be successful in our business. So when I say that 20% there, as you can see, it says forget. I don't mean to forget them as human beings or the value they represent. When we say forget, it's just probably not worth a lot of time spending on that group. One of the ways, sometimes people will say, well, how do you know whether that 20% on the left can't finally make its way into that 60% in the middle? And I'll give you some ways that you can determine fairly early on as to whether or not they're worth your investment of time and energy and effort to try to help them. One of the biggest indicators is going to be if you care more than they do. If you as a leader care more about their success than they do, that's a fairly reasonable indication that they're going to fall into this 20% of people who really won't make it no matter what we do. If people that you give tools and resources to, actually even activity levels that you tell them that they need to be following, and they just systematically dismiss it or don't follow it, that's another good indication that you're dealing probably with a 20%er that won't make it. People who are concerned about their success, people who are trying, though they may be failing, people who are doing the things that you're asking them to do, that are trying to implement the things that you are teaching them, those are your 60%ers. And those 60%ers fall along a spectrum. Some of them take much more hand-holding and development and encouragement than others, but they will, with time and with perseverance, and particularly with patience on your part, they can move along that spectrum of rank progression and growth. There is no set timeline to that. Some people can move across that spectrum very quickly, and others it takes much, 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 much longer. And that's okay. As we all know, that this business is and always will be inherently a prospecting business. The important thing is that you are continually adding more and more people into your funnel, and hopefully moving people from that 60% into that continuum, and moving them from left to right in terms of their progression. The 20% that are going to do it no matter what, there we just call that friend. You need to be their friend. You need to be there to help in any way that they may ask for it or that they may need it. What you will generally find is that they don't need a lot. Oftentimes, when you're dealing with incredibly high achievers and high performers, sometimes the best thing you can do as their leader or mentor is simply stay out of their way. But on those occasions when they do want to ask you for help or get feedback, that's something that you should readily do, because these are the folks that are largely going to do the business on their own. So that 60% really is where we as a company should focus our efforts and resources, you as a leader. as an upline should focus your efforts and attention on that 60%. And sometimes it's difficult to know where people fall immediately, but generally over time, it will manifest itself if you watch them and you watch how they respond to certain things that you ask them to do, how serious they take what you ask them to do. And there is certainly the possibility of a sleeper. There are people who maybe for years will not necessarily show any interest in doing anything that would advance them from a rank perspective or from a development perspective, but for some reason, maybe a life situation or a wake-up call will happen. And you will see people that will jump from that 20% who really aren't succeeding. There will be a mind shift or a shift in the way they view things, the way they view their business. Maybe they've had a economic setback or something, but there may be something that will trigger in them a desire to actually proactively move along the business. That's why it's important to never completely walk away from those individuals. Now, again, what I'm sharing with you here on this slide is not in any regard scientific. This is just something that when it comes to focusing your finite resources, because every one of us have limitations on our time, we have limitations on our resources. We all know that we can't be all things to all people. Try to be what you can be at your very best to those folks who fall in that 60% category. And just keep that in mind as you're constantly surveying and evaluating your respective teams as to where do they fall on this particular continuum. Now, to reinforce that, I'd like to share a principle that probably all of you have had some familiarity with. And it's this concept of the Pareto principle, often referred to as, if you haven't heard of it as the Pareto principle, you've certainly probably heard of at least the 80-20 rule. Pareto, actually, the Pareto principle was actually the name of a gentleman. His full name was Vilfredo Federico Damaso Pareto, or Pareto, who was Italian, was born in Italy in 1848. He ultimately went on in his life to become a fairly significant philosopher and economist. And the story goes that one day he noticed, he was a farmer, one day he noticed that 20% of the pea plants in his garden actually generated about 80% of the healthy pea pods. And this particular observation caused him to think about uneven distributions. He went on and did a number of studies. He thought about wealth and discovered that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. He looked at different industries and found that 80% of production typically came from just 20% of companies. It's a concept or a principle that proves itself out over and over and over in virtually every aspect of our lives. And I'll give you some scenarios to think about in terms of the Pareto principle. So here you can see that 80% of outputs result from 20% of inputs, or 80% of your results, stated a different way, come from 20% of the effort and time that you put in to those 20%. 80% of consequences flow from about 20% of the causes. So again, a very well-known concept and principle that if you've had any business or economic classes at school, you obviously heard of Pareto and this principle. A number of years ago, I was curious to see if the Pareto principle was alive and well at ASEA. And so ran some numbers, actually just re-updated these numbers to see if the 80-20 rule applied at all in our business. And it's pretty close. There's some variations, but what you can see here is that 80% of revenue at ASEA comes from 18% of the markets. So fairly in line with the Pareto principle. Another way to look at it is that 82% of our enrollments come from 24% of the markets that we are in. And one that's a little bit more out of alignment, but still very interesting in terms of the ratio, is that about 10% of our associate base have enrolled 83% of all associates in the company. So here you have, you've got an even more dramatic, skew in that 10% of your associate base responsible for the bulk of enrollments in the organization. So if you think about Pareto, though, think about it in your own life. Give you an example, maybe some different ways to think about this. And I'm just making up some numbers here. If you have, say, 15 rooms in your house, for example, but you spend about 80% of your time maybe in just 3 of them, maybe your bedroom, your family room, and your kitchen, that's the Pareto principle at work. If you live in a town and you think about the number of roads, of all the roads that exist in that town, how many of them do you actually drive on a fairly regular basis? Probably Pareto would play itself out there. Think of your smartphone. How many apps do you have pinned on your iPhone, and then how many of those apps do you actually use? You're probably going to find the 80-20 rule coming into play somewhere in that particular thing. The thing that's important to remember about Pareto is trying to identify those things that are taking up time in the form of activities but are not generating the results. And the takeaway here on this would be that identify the things that you are spending time on, again, because we live in a world of finite resources, time being one of the most important one of those, and place your time and energy on the activities that yield the highest results. Now, what you'll often find is that the things that yield the highest results are oftentimes the things that you like to do the least. Meaning that there's a lot of things that we can occupy our time with, and trying to trick ourselves into believing that we are doing something, when the reality is that while we may be tricking ourselves into being busy, we have to be honest with ourselves in that busy should never be confused with productive. We can do a myriad of activities in our day-to-day lives that will keep us busy and will occupy our time, but they are not necessarily things that are going to lead you to the outcomes that you want. And that is a very, very sometimes difficult concept to get your head around, in that I have talked to many, many people who are telling me that they work themselves to death with seemingly no result. And then when you actually dig into what are the activities that they are engaged in, you generally find that they're not necessarily activities that are going to, for example, in our world at ASEA, that aren't necessarily going to further an outcome. As I've mentioned many times, this is by and large a business, and anything that we are doing that is taking our time, energy, and attention away from prospecting, we should probably evaluate how much time we should give that in a particular in a particular day. So maximize the amount of time that you're spending on the things that are giving you the results, and seek to minimize the things that fill your day that don't necessarily have a positive impact on what you're trying to accomplish. So again, that's a concept that's probably not new to any of you, but I thought I would share it as I lead into what I really wanted to talk to you about tonight, which is another principle that some of you may be familiar with that has become known in a lot of industrial psychology and management texts and lectures as something called the Hawthorne Effect. And this is something that is relevant to every single one of us. And it's what I wanted to spend the bulk of my time on tonight with you. So to understand the Hawthorne Effect, let me give you just a little bit of background in terms of where the Hawthorne Effect actually was conceived and who is responsible for really making it a concept that went on to be studied in business and economic literature. So the Hawthorne Effect was a term that was coined back in the 1950s by a gentleman by the name of Henry A. Landsberger. Henry Landsberger was hired by the Western Electric factory back between 1924 and 1932. So this is a concept that has been in existence for a long, long time. He was hired by the Western Electric factory. It was actually called the Hawthorne Works. That was the name of the factory. It was a division of Western Electric, but it was the Hawthorne Works factory, which is where the name Hawthorne came from. And he was hired by this company to do a series of experiments to see what they could do to increase employee productivity. And Hawthorne commissioned a study to see if their workers would become more productive in higher or lower levels of lighting in the factory. So very, very simply, Hawthorne, this division of Western Electric factory, they wanted to know that if they increased the lighting in the factory, would worker productivity go up versus whether the lights were lower, would that have an impact on productivity? And he discovered something in the course of this study that I think is very powerful for all of us in the business that we're in, and not just in our business lives, but in our family lives and our personal lives, and virtually any aspect of our life. This principle, I think, holds true. So again, he was commissioned to see whether if adjusting the light level in the factory would increase or decrease worker productivity. What they found was that during the study, the workers' productivity did actually improve when changes in light were made. Now, what was interesting about that is that they could not correlate that necessarily to whether the lights were higher or lower. All they could correlate it to and really tie it to that the workers were more productive during the study. And really the punchline was that the light really had absolutely nothing to do with it. You could do a same study now on, temperature or any number of variables that you could change or alter in a work setting. But during the study, the workers' productivity improved when the changes in light were made. But following the study, the workers' productivity decreased. It went back to what it was prior to the study. And even if they found, if they increased the level of light in the factory and productivity went up, and let's say that they decided to leave the lighting at a higher level, thinking that that's what caused the higher productivity, what happened is that after the study was concluded and maybe the lights were brighter, that the workers' productivity decreased and essentially baselined back to what it was before the study was even done. So that led to a number of different thoughts and discussions that again became essentially known as, in many circles, as the Hawthorne Effect. And what the takeaway is that the level of light in the factory made no difference in the productivity. So it wasn't that there was more light or less light. The lights had nothing to do with it. The level of light made no difference in the productivity. As the workers increased output, went up, increased, whether the amount was switched from a low level to a high level or vice versa. So it didn't matter what the lighting level was. During the study, the productivity increased. So what do we take away from that? Well, we take away from that is that the workers' increased output had nothing to do with what was actually being studied. And this is a very, very important psychological aspect of we as humans, and plays an enormous role, I believe, in how we interact with our teams or with people that we are trying to help improve their productivity. So again, the output had nothing to do with what was being studied. The productivity gained occurred as a result of the motivational effect on the workers of the interest that was being shown in them. So individuals improve or modify an aspect of their behavior in response to their awareness of being observed. Now, think about that in your own life. Think about maybe back to when you were young, when you were a child or a kid, and you were playing say you were in an organized sports league. Did the way that you approached the game or the activity that you were involved in change based on whether or not maybe your parents or somebody who was important to you was in the stands watching you? Because that's essentially what the Hawthorne Effect is teaching us here, is that people don't necessarily respond to oftentimes what we think it is, in this case, lighting. It had nothing to do with the fact that the lights were higher, brighter, or lower, or dimmer, but there was a motivational effect on these employees because there was an interest that was being shown in them. They were being watched. They were being studied. There was attention and interest being placed on what they were doing. And we as individuals improve or modify aspects of our behavior when we know we're being observed. Put a different way, people behave differently when they perceive that they are being watched. Now, think about this in terms of our business. Have you ever had anybody who has, unbeknownst to you, maybe somebody who you did not know was even paying any attention to anything that you were doing, walk up to you and make a comment or write you a note or send you an email or in some way pay you a compliment based on the job that you were doing? Somebody who maybe you don't even know who they are congratulated you on a rank advancement or in achieving something in your life. and think of the impact that that had on you. Even people who are not necessarily driven by recognition, and there are people who are not necessarily motivated by recognition. Many people are, and recognition means a great deal to them. But regardless of whether or not you are highly motivated by recognition, everybody is appreciative of people taking the time to recognize the effort that they put in to accomplish something significant. You can have an extraordinary impact on people in your organization if you simply pay attention to what they are doing and let them know that you are watching, to let them know that you are pulling for them, to let them know that they are within a certain level of breaking a new rank or enrolling another person. I can't express to you the power of this particular principle. Do not in any way mean to suggest that it is artificial, that it is something that is contrived. Because if it's fake or contrived, people will read into that, and you can potentially do more damage or harm than good. But when you take a genuine interest in the lives and the accomplishments of the people, and they know that you know what they are working for and what they're trying to accomplish, they will, well, simply put, just as the Hawthorne study found, their productivity levels will increase. And if you don't believe that, think of all the different people who you have heard teach over the years about goal setting and trying to accomplish something significant. Almost universally, any author or speaker who talks about goals and high achievement, they always tell you something very similar. They may say it in different ways, but they always tell you to share what you're trying to accomplish with other people. And that is a very, very fundamental component of what the Hawthorne Effect teaches us, is that when you know that people are paying attention to what you're doing, your behavior will change. I can promise you. When people in your organization know that you are aware of what they are struggling to achieve, and then when they achieve it or get close to it, that a random phone call, an email, a handwritten note, even a comment in passing can lift somebody's spirits in a way that you almost can't get in any other fashion. And it's this fundamental, basic human emotion that we have, that when we know we are being observed, we put our best foot forward and try to do the absolute best thing that we can. We actually work and live in an industry that the Hawthorne Effect plays itself out in spades. There's a multiplier effect to our industry of people believing and feeling and understanding that there are others who are genuinely interested in their levels of success, in their productivity, and in their growth. That's essentially one of the reasons why we have systematic recognition programs. Systematic recognition programs are designed to make sure that people know that when they do certain things, they are rewarded for them, and that somebody is paying attention to what those things are doing. You as leaders, it would be well for you to know the reporting that is available to you, to know how to use your back office in such a way that you can know what is happening in many cases, very, very far downstream from you. And do not ever underestimate the impact that you can have on somebody by simply letting them know that you saw and appreciated and respected what they did, whether big or small. And sometimes even the smaller things can mean the most to people. So I would just leave you with that tonight, is that your organization will be better served the more in tune you are to what the people in your organization are striving to accomplish. And if they know that you are paying attention to what's happening, if they know that you have a genuine interest in what they are doing, they will behave differently. And when I say that, is that they will work harder, they will work longer, they will not want to let you down in many instances. And so take that one principle and try to apply for a period of time, and come back and tell me if it didn't work. It can have enormous positive impacts to the people that you're leading. And again, I'm not suggesting that this is something that needs to be contrived or something that is insincere that you're doing just because you think that it will drive your business. People will sniff out insincerity very, very quickly. But if you take an honest, sincere, proactive interest in the people that are trying to accomplish and grow and become, they will work wonders because they know that you are paying attention to what it is that they are trying to do. So I would just leave that with you tonight. Hopefully you can find some value. I can tell you in my own life that there are many, many, many instances, too many to name, where somebody who I did not even think was necessarily aware of who I was went out of their way to point something out that they appreciated about what I had done or what I was trying to achieve. And those are the kinds of things that we all need in our lives to lift each other up in the difficulties that this business invariably represents. And you can do that, and you can make an impact, and you can make an incredible difference in the lives of people just by simply observing, paying attention, and then recognizing when the time comes or when you feel it's appropriate. So thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me this evening. I hope that it's been valuable to you. Please know that we are deeply appreciative of the work that you do, of the effort that goes into building this company. We know it is not easy, but we certainly know that it is worthwhile. And we're having a phenomenal year. As great as last year was, this year is even better. And we know, and it's important that you know that we know that that is a direct reflection on your willingness to go out and share the message of this product, this opportunity, and this culture with the people that you come in contact with. So with that, we will say goodnight. Thank you for all you do. Try me on what I just talked to you about. If you say, oh, that's hogwash, just try it. Just put it into practice for a week or 2 weeks and see if you don't see incredible things happen in your business, in your personal life, in the relationships that you have that are most dear to you by simply taking an interest in what other people do. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.